Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kevin Drewley, and I'm an associate editor with Safety and Health magazine, the official magazine of the National Safety Council. We appreciate you listening in as we look ahead to our National Safety Council Virtual Congress and Expo, which is set for the first week of March. Because of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, we unfortunately cannot all be together at an expo hall in a city that hopefully wouldn't have snow on the ground or single-digit temperatures in the forecast. But as we prepare for the Council's first ever virtual Congress and Expo, we'd like to help listeners and attendees get ready by checking in with our keynote speakers. Today, we're joined by NIOSH Director John Howard, who will help kick off the event at the opening session at 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central on Wednesday, March 3rd. Dr. Howard, we thank you for your time and expertise today. To get things started, what are some takeaways you hope attendees gain from your keynote at opening session?
Well, thank you. The keynote is the future of work. This is a vast topic, and it has many, many different parts. What I'm going to concentrate on to try to organize our thinking is in three major areas. One is workplace issues. The second is work itself, and three is the workforce. So under the workplace, I'm going to talk about new organizational designs that we're seeing for the workplace. Clearly, we're all in a more virtual world than we were before, and that's a new organizational design. And the second issue I'm going to mention under workplace are new work arrangements. A lot of us are aware of temporary work arrangements, but new ones have to do with gig work, platform work. And then under work, I'm going to concentrate on a number of technologies that are new. For instance, sensor technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, exoskeletons. There's a whole host of new technologies that we're seeing in the workplace, and they do have safety and health implications, so we're going to talk about those. And then the last area is the workforce. A lot of work is becoming more cognitive, more complex, and we see a skills gap in the American workforce. And I think that's a big issue for a lot of employers. And second of all, in that workforce issue, we have the added concern that a lot of workers have for automation. What is it going to do? Is it going to replace my job? Am I going to be displaced because my employer is automating my job? So we're going to talk about all three of those areas and give listeners a general overview so they grasp the scope and the breadth of future work studies.
No, all sounds very interesting, and I'm certain folks will be very, very in tune to everything. Just to that end, the COVID-19 pandemic is also a vital component of this, and just wanted to ask next, how has the NIOSH response to this pandemic evolved as the U.S. now approaches 1 year of dealing with it?
So, Kevin, great question. And I think I would answer it by saying our activities, the activities of NIOSH, can be divided into three areas. And the first one, which was the earliest that we started doing in March and April and May of 2020, was trying to assist employment settings in how best to protect their workers. We certainly did a lot of technical on-site assistance visits to meat and poultry plants, to other workplaces where essential workers did not have the ability, like many Americans, to work at home. They have to go to work. Grocery store workers, retail workers, mail carriers, et cetera, hospital workers, et cetera. So that was, I think, our first phase. Our second phase involved our involvement in testing. As you know, in the spring and the summer, getting a COVID-19 test to figure out whether you were infected or not became a big issue. The laboratory gold standard, or PCR testing, versus the newer antigen testing, and now the newest, which is home testing. So we've been through those three testing phases and trying to provide advice to employers and workers about testing. And then I think the phase that we've moved into most recently is the vaccination phase, especially vaccinating essential workers, as well as determining issues related to our future. For instance, do vaccinated workers have to quarantine when they come into close contact with a COVID-19 case the same way that unvaccinated workers do? That's a question that we just recently answered by saying no, they don't. That's the latest CDC guidance. We're now, I think, in a very big phase of masking, showing, unlike when we started this a year ago, we didn't have any studies about cloth facial coverings. Now we're finding increasing evidence that both the source as well as the person protected, if they both wear cloth facial coverings, universal masking has been shown to be extremely effective. We have a number of laboratory studies and epidemiological studies showing about masking. So all of those phases essentially are still happening. And I think we'll continue to see as we go through 2021 the vaccination of the population, and then eventually what kind of rollbacks, if any, can we see in terms of masking, distancing, hand washing, as we get to a fully vaccinated population, which hopefully we will get to soon this year.
We certainly know that you know this, but for any listeners out there who may not be aware, NIOSH is marking its 50th anniversary in 2021. So as NIOSH reaches that milestone, as we conclude our discussion today, Dr. Howard, what accomplishments is the agency most proud of, would you say, and what are some possible future endeavors that occupational safety stakeholders should keep their eye on?
So that's a great question, and it's real hard for me to select one or two or three items over a 50-year history of the Institute. I'm just very proud to be working with so many dedicated professionals at the Institute. And I want to give a big shout out to the folks that have worked at NIOSH from 1971 on. They have created a reputation for the Institute for excellence that we just owe a lot of debt of gratitude to them. So it's hard to pick out. Certainly NIOSH has advised both OSHA and MSHA. We have generated science research that both regulatory agencies have used to create standards: lead, cotton dust, asbestos, coal dust. And also NIOSH has created additional guidance documents that have not matured into regulation, but which employers and workers have valued over the years. And I think as we have gone into the most recent era, we've expanded our scope of work to include what we call total worker health. A lot of topics are not related to physical agents, chemical agents, biological agents. For example, the use of opiates in the United States and the tremendous scourge that they've had for workers, the use of cannabis and the worker connection. A lot of those issues don't relate to NIOSH's original mission in 1971. NIOSH has grown with the times to be able to offer advice over its 50-year history to whatever is both relevant and impactful in the current time that we're in.
Well, Dr. Howard, thank you for your time today, and we look forward to hearing many more of your insights during opening session of the National Safety Council Virtual Congress and Expo. And again, that's set for 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central on Wednesday, March 3rd. If you want to learn more about Congress and Expo, please visit www.congress.nsc.org to view a program. Registration for the event is open. Be well, and thank you for listening.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is Alan Ferguson, Associate Editor with Safety+Health magazine, the official magazine of the National Safety Council. Today, we're continuing our podcast series to introduce you to the keynote speakers at this year's virtual NSC Safety Congress and Expo. And with us is Corrie Pitzer, the CEO of SAFEmap International, a global safety consulting firm. Corrie's delivered a number of recent Congress and Expo keynotes, and the presentations that I've seen have always been extremely fascinating. And this year's occupational keynote looks like it'll elicit the same adjective. It's titled, The Final Frontier, Zero Fatalities, to Boldly Go Where No One Has Gone Before. And that presentation will begin at 9 a.m. Central Time and 10 a.m. Eastern on March 4th. I'm thrilled to get the opportunity to speak with Corrie before his presentation.
Thank you so much, Alan. Looking forward to the discussion.
Now, the description of your speech in the Congress and Expo program speaks of predicting or preventing the next fatality, obviously referring to that as the holy grail among safety professionals. Besides what is outlined in the program, what should people expect from this presentation?
Alan, this is actually going to be quite a ride, I would say. This has been quite a journey for me over the past 2 years, and maybe I should just give you a little bit of the background how this came to be. I was asked by, and this is 2 years ago now, by a large mining corporation to support and assist them in a program called Elimination of Fatalities. And so it was a very ambitious program. And so what they did was they selected a core team of specialists, of which I was one. There were three others. And it was led by an executive in the company, a senior person with the name of Brian Maynard. And so this team visited the various sites in this corporation, over 40 sites around the world. And what we did is we talked to probably between 8 and 10,000 frontline workers. And during these engagements, we took each person or team that we spoke to like on a journey of discovering fatal risk. So things that they knew about that they didn't want to talk openly about, things that they didn't know about, and especially what they didn't know about. So it was a very pioneering and exploring process that we went through. And we uncovered multiple fatal risks. And it was documented. It was then presented to the teams, the management teams, and then we went to the next site. So since then, Brian Maynard and one of the other specialists, Mike Byrne, and I, we did a deep dive into the data, which is actually an enormous rich source of real data. So it's not an academic experiment. This is real life stuff. It really opened my eyes about the multiple risk exposures that exist, that we don't see, and we may never see because they may only exist for a second or two, maybe a minute, or once every 4 to 5 years, some of them once in a lifetime. So they have no precursors, no near misses, no prior events. And this was the fascinating side of it. So if I can use a metaphor, I'm not sure if it'll work, but it's like mini black swan events that appear and disappear like one-day flies. So I hope I haven't mixed up my metaphor too much there. But this was really a discovery for me. And if you look at prediction of fatalities, these are buzzwords: big data, artificial intelligence, and many companies or software companies, especially, they started peddling this idea that they can predict trends in your data, and that'll tell you, if you use their software, where the next fatal accident will happen. Now, there's a word that the Australians, where I lived for a long time, Australians use quite a lot for those kind of claims, and they call it bollocks, which is basically, it's a crude term for exaggerated truths and blatant lies or unfathomable rubbish. That's what these kind of claims are. So I make this claim of going to where no one has gone before, zero fatalities, and so I allude to prediction. So what I want to distance myself in this presentation from is what exactly have we discovered as predictive. So I think what came to be for me was almost a new network in an organization, discovery of a network in an organization that exists somewhere between the culture and the systems and the operational processes, and you can't quite put your finger on it. Think of a bottle with small stones in, and you pour running glue into it. So the glue mixes and almost become like systemic forces. And these systemic forces are what we have found precede risk exposure. So it is forces that in the organization dynamically link with events and circumstances and human actions on the ground in a random pattern to spark a fatal event. Or not. Nothing happens. And that's this element that I want to present. It's almost like I call these, we have lagging indicators and we have leading indicators. And James Reason talked about pathogens. I call those latent indicators. What I'm talking about here are actually lurking indicators. They lurk in the organization. They come and go, they ebb and flow in a way that we can actually predict. We can measure that. So this is what I will show in my presentation, is these systemic forces, how they ebb and flow. And so it is a probe into randomness, but not trying to predict the random event themselves, if you know what I mean. Fatal event itself is a random event and cannot be predicted. But if you have a look at how and I'll give you an example of one in a moment. But if you look at critical risk management today, the focus on serious injury, fatal potential events, we've made quite a bit of progress in industry now. And so like we define those situations, circumstances like working at heights or confined spaces. These things can kill you. And so that's not what this is about. This is much deeper than that. It's into the unknown level of this organization. And I want to maybe create a term here that we call far miss as against a near miss. So what is a far miss? A near miss is, when something almost happened, you're a second away or a couple of yards away and something goes wrong. There's a release of energy, but no one gets hurt. There's maybe some property damage. That's a near miss. A far miss is something that is maybe 10 yards away or a half an hour away or maybe 10 years away. It is this potential that hasn't got the energy yet. But if you start to construct what can happen, what can go wrong here, what can come together, it is quite amazing what we've discovered. And so it is not like one of the indicators is this, I call this the golden ratio, is how many of these near miss events do you get in your organization reported, but more importantly, what does not get reported? What is hideable? So if you get people reporting things that they could have easily hidden away, your organization is approaching a level of clarity, a level of transparency, where you see the risks more clear, you identify them, they dynamically exist, they go away. That is an ideal situation. What mostly happens in organizations, and the more this happens, the more likely we're exposed to fatal events, is when we don't know what we don't know. People don't talk. We've got this focus on safety in the organization. People don't want to upset the apple cart. And that kind of culture in the organization, and it's commonly known as the reporting culture. But how do we know it's a reporting or a non-reporting culture? It is this ratio of hideable versus non-hideable potential events. And that's one of 7 that I've identified out of all this data. And in this presentation, I'll present these 7, starting with this one. And this is what I call the coefficient of chronic unease, or a term that I started to use more recently, the coefficient of restlessness. An organization that is restless, that is constantly on the lookout, probing into these forces, is an organization that has a better chance of controlling its fatal risks, as against an organization that fails on these 7 indicators, and I call those a restrained organization. They are more exposed to fatal events. It may never happen. You can have an advanced organization on the one side, you can have a restrained one on the other side, and you can still have a fatal event on the advanced one and not on the restrained one, because that's this randomness. But at least what you can do is you can look at these forces in the organization. And the research I've done over the past 2 years now is highlighting what exactly can we measure. And I'll show some examples of organizations that has been quite progressive in this field. One organization is a company called Deb Marine, who mine diamonds from the seabed in extremely dangerous circumstances with big ships, and how they have actually progressed with this progressive identification of these lurking indicators. So, Alan, that was a bit of a mouthful. I hope I didn't confuse the subject more than I clarified it.
No, I was following. I thought it was a pretty fascinating. Now, you touched upon this, I believe, in your last answer, but in looking at their recaps from some of your previous Congress and Expo presentations, it seems at least one of the connecting threads is trying to get professionals and others to look at safety from a different perspective, or to see something they haven't seen. Is that the case? And if so, why is that so important to you?
I've had the unfortunate event experience early in my career. I was a young human resource and safety training manager at a platinum division of a company in South Africa, which is today the largest mining corporation in the world, BHP. And when it was still separated from this company, I was working as an HR safety training person. And then in the gold division of this company, this was a big organization, 62 companies around Southern Africa. A catastrophic event in a gold mine killed 177 workers on the ground. And as a result of that, with many things happening, I was actually then appointed as the group risk manager for this company. And I always felt that I didn't deserve this big accolade at the young age, 29 years of age, that stage, because of a tragedy. And what killed them? Well, it was a hard foam that they sprayed on the sidewalls and roof of the underground tunnels for safety reasons. And this foam caught fire, something deemed impossible. And it was done in only a small section of hundreds of miles of underground tunnels a decade before. And on that day, the forces that I spoke about came together, conspired, and killed. And I developed after that for this company an elimination of fatalities program. And it was built on the principles of what is now known as the new view of safety, or safety 2, or psychological safety. And when I started consulting with these ideas, like 25 years ago, I was called a maverick and a heretic, and only brave companies took on board what we said. But today, it's mainstream stuff. And I feel that the great shifts in paradigms are often brought about sad events, tragic events. Think Bhopal, Piper Alpha, Texas Refinery, makes big shifts in the safety field. And I really feel we can and we should create change without burning platforms. And if you think Deming did this in a quality paradigm in the 60s and 70s of the previous century, when what he defined as this change of paradigm: drive out fear, don't target workers, create trust, break down barriers, create consistency of purpose. All of these things is actually what we talk about today as safety 2, or psychological safety. And what an enormous impact did he make on the quality movement, or the quality processes in organizations. And I think we can do the same thing. We should do the same thing. The safety profession, we need to change our paradigm, I think, because we could be hampering the operational process. We say to the organization, don't risk, don't change, don't move boundaries, stay within this narrow width of work as imagined. I think we must actually go the opposite way. We must create confidence and competence in the organization, and especially the frontline workers, so that they don't fear safety, that they don't run away, but that they eagerly want to contribute to success and positive outcomes. And for me, that's important, that we take the profession in that direction.
That's great. In an ideal world, what do you hope that people take away from this presentation?
Alan, I think two or three things. The first thing is, I think that they should take away an understanding that safety is not rocket science, but that it's far more complex than rocket science. Safety is not the simple, let's prevent accidents notion, let's create a nice environment for people to work in, let's create psychological safety at the front. It is far more complex than that. And we should understand that. And hopefully my presentation will show that. I think the second thing is that safety management will profoundly change in the next decade or so. And either we the change agents ourselves in the safety profession, or we the victims of change, like what happened in the quality movement. And I think thirdly, we can't approach the future in an old-fashioned sail ship or a steamboat or even a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier ship. We will need spaceships, and hence the title of my talk, Boldly Go Where No One Has Gone Before. So those are the three things.
Well, thank you so much once again for speaking with me. And personally, I'm really looking forward to your occupational keynote. Again, that begins at 9 a.m. Central and 10 a.m. Eastern on March 4th. And if you want to learn more about Congress and Expo, you can go to congress.nsc.org.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Barry Botino, an associate editor with Safety and Health magazine, the official magazine of the National Safety Council. Thanks for listening in today. We're going to look ahead at our virtual NSC Safety Congress and Expo, which is planned March 1st through the 5th. And unfortunately, because of COVID-19, we can't all be together. But what we're going to do with this podcast series is introduce you to our keynote speakers at Congress and Expo. Joining me today is Ricky Rollins. He is the president of Ricky Rollins Safety Speeches, and Ricky will be delivering the motivational keynote at our Congress and Expo at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, that's 1 Central, on Thursday, March 4th. And Ricky's presentation is titled The Day We Will Remember, a powerful story from his time working in the steel industry. And Ricky, I wanted to ask you first, what would you want attendees to take away from your presentation?
Hey, Barry, thanks for having me on today. And what I'd like for attendees to take away is I want you to use your influence on the people around you. And more importantly, also, is I want you to let them influence you. So you can influence people in bad ways. You can teach them the wrong things. You can teach them to skip steps, or you can do the right thing by using your influence and hoping that they're going to be able to have a little bit safer life. And we're not just talking about at work, what we generally think about. We're going to be talking about home and taking those things away from home and influencing those people that you love at home and at work.
Well, Ricky, one thing you do tell is some great stories, and you tell some very impactful stories. And I wanted to ask you about how those stories can still impact people while we're in a virtual event during COVID-19.
Well, I'm going to be the first to admit, Barry, that it is a little harder in a virtual event for a motivational type speaker to be able to get to the audience because you're not making eye contact. So it does make it tougher. Probably the second or third one I've done, I've decided to step away from the computer and actually, do a little walking to try to get a little bit closer to being as if I was in front of a live audience as I'm giving the virtual presentation. But I'm actually taking it a step further for the National Safety Council Congress and Expo. It's a big deal here for me and hopefully for everybody that's going to show up. And what we're going to do there, Barry, is I'm actually going to go into a studio. I have a cameraman that's going to be following me. I'll be in front of the room. I'll have my PowerPoint presentation up on a screen, just like I normally would if you were at a live event sitting in front of the audience. So what we're hoping to do, even though it's going to be a virtual event, is give the attendees as close as an experience of being in the room with me during my presentation. So I'm gonna do the best I can to make it as good as it can be for the attendees.
Well, like you said, Ricky, one day we'll be back together again, hopefully soon. I did want to ask you too, how do you impact worker safety now as a safety speaker, as opposed to when you did when you're working in the steel industry?
When I was working at the mill, a lot of the safety part I was doing then was, recognizing hazards, issues come up, take care of the hazards. And you're still trying to build a culture, but most of it was about what was going on at the mill for everybody and how we're going to be safe at the mill and how we're going to do these jobs safely and getting everybody to understand that if we need to step back and shut down production, those are the things that we should be able to do. But what I've been able to do now that I'm actually outside of the mill is the presentation is more than just about our work. And part of it, there's a seatbelt story in there. There's a leadership story in there of how, I let a 17-year-old girl tell me how to do my job, and we changed the company's safety policy, and that's letting somebody influence you. I give somebody a card, and I'll ask them to send me a picture of them wearing the seatbelt, and I'll send it to my buddies in my presentation so they know that their stories made a difference. So about a week after I gave Woody my card, not expecting anything back, to my surprise and joy, I get a picture of him with his family and he's wearing a seatbelt. And I'm excited. I text him back. He's all excited and now he's made a change. About a year after that, I'm at a safety meeting with his safety manager, and I show him that picture, and he's all pumped up about the change in Woody. And what they actually do at that mill is they let Woody speak to his coworkers in a forum about safety and how he believes in safety. So we made a complete change, getting that guy to change. Now, so we changed him. But also, what I ask you to do in there is influence. So a year after that, I just called Woody out of the blue one day, and Woody says, "Ricky, I was just talking about you yesterday." And I said, "Woody, what do you mean? Why would you be talking about me yesterday? I'm excited, but why?" He said, "Well, I was building my son a giant jungle gym. I'm up on a ladder, probably 10 feet high, and I got a 2x12 up there, and it's the wrong size. So I tell my son to hand me the skill saw. He hands me the skill saw, and I get ready to cut it. And then I realize, what would Ricky want me to do?" And I handed him the skill saw and said, "Son, we're going to bring it down." He said, "Well, why, Dad? You could cut it right there." He said, "I'm bringing it down because of Ricky Rollins." And then he explained to his son that it wasn't the safest thing to do. Now, two things happen here in the story, Barry, and one of them is Woody didn't do an unsafe act. So he prevented maybe him having that accident one time. But what he taught his son might stop his son 1,000 times from having an accident. Woody using his influence on his son that day is one of the most important things I think I've ever heard anybody tell me that we were able to do. So that's how we use the influence, is to get people not only to affect the things that they're doing, but to realize those things that they're doing will affect and influence those people around them. So that's how I think I've been able to make a bigger impact outside of the job I had before, being involved with the safety from 90 people, is to take it to everybody that's in the presentations.
Well, we appreciate you sharing that, Ricky. And for some great stories, folks, you can listen in to Ricky's motivational keynote at NSC Congress and Expo. And again, that's at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central on Thursday, March 4th. And if you want to learn more about Congress and Expo, you can log on to congress.nsc.org. You can view our program there and you can register for the event.